In 2002, the disappearance of Laci Peterson, who was 8 months pregnant, gripped the nation. Her husband, Scott Peterson, quickly became the prime suspect, leading to his arrest and a high-profile trial for the murder of Laci and their unborn son, Connor. This case continues to captivate public attention today, especially with the recent Netflix series bringing it back into the spotlight. In this powerful episode, we're joined by Jon Buehler, the investigator who played a key role in Scott Peterson's arrest. Join us as we break down the investigation, the trial, and the shocking twists that have kept this case in the public eye for over 2 decades. Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields. Jon Buehler, thank you so much for joining us on Gold Shields, buddy. It is a pleasure.
Well, right back at you guys. I, surprised to get the contact and you wanted to have me on and everything. And these are always fun to do, especially in this format, talking to, a couple of guys that did the job, in one of the greatest police departments in the world, at least in my opinion. And I'm just happy to be here with you guys today.
Well, thank you, John. It's an honor to have you. We talk about big cases, and like Tom just said, detectives have lots of cases, and they all mean a lot to them. Every victim, we take it personally. We really want to see justice for everybody. And you've had a long, distinguished career with a lot of interesting cases, we know. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you got into police work, because not everybody has the same path. Not everybody is, from the time they're born, they're like watching, Dragnet, and I want to be a cop. No. Some of us don't realize until a little bit later in life or a little later on in the path that, hey, this is something I'd like to do. We were talking a little bit earlier, but give our audience a little bit of a brief as to, you grew up in Minnesota.
Yeah, I grew up in Minneapolis, and my grandfather on my mom's side, he was a Minneapolis cop. 2 of his oldest sons were Minneapolis cops. One of those uncles had a son who was a Minneapolis cop. There are 9 of us in the family that went into law enforcement. And, that most of them were in Minnesota. I ended up in California. And then, of course, my son ended up down here in Florida doing the job. And I was hanging out with my uncle. He was a lieutenant, a detective at Minneapolis, and he was a widower. His wife had passed away. And so, my mom kind of helped him out a few times with some things, and they were kind of close. And then I'd go hunting and fishing with him in northern Minnesota. And he'd tell me about work, and he'd tell, I was 13 years old, and he was telling me about what he was doing at work. And gosh, he just sounded like he was having a good time all the time. And one day my mom and I were downtown for something. I don't remember what it was, but we stopped in at the first precinct and we went into the detective squad room down there. And there's shoulder holsters and guys walking around and they're, throwing things at each other and laughing. And I'm thinking, what a great work atmosphere this has got to be. And I asked him one time about the job, and he said, I got the greatest job in the world. I work with great people, and it's always fun. And I hit my dad up. He was in manufacturing, and I asked him, I said, hey, do you ever have fun at work? And, no, work's not for fun. It's to provide, you get satisfaction out of making things. And I'm thinking, well, that sounds pretty boring. And, my dad, he did well, and he, he was precision and everything, but I just thought, like us, we just generally don't grow up. We grow older, but we don't grow up. And so I thought, the cop thing, I knew I wasn't going to be able to race Ferraris or, fly F4s off a carrier. So I thought the next best thing is being a cop. And so I like 21 years old, almost 21, I roll into Minneapolis PD to get an application. And the guy down there, he goes, hey, I know your family. I'll just be upfront with you. You're not the flavor we're looking for, and not the right gender. And this is before I knew that I could identify as a woman. Otherwise, I would have probably gotten hired there, but I couldn't do that. So I just took the rejection. Like you do. I mean, you face rejection, and you just decide, well, I'll take a different path. And I had an uncle in California, my mom's youngest brother. He sent me an application from Modesto. I filled it out as a gag, and then 8 months later, they hired me after making 3 trips out there to take the test. And went in there on a Monday, got my uniform specifications. Tuesday, I showed up with my uniforms. And then, but gosh, by noon, I was in uniform with a 6-inch 38 in a holster, riding with a training officer. Hadn't been to the academy, hadn't been to the range or nothing. And, they put me on swing shift for about 3 weeks before the academy started. And then that was pretty much it. 5 years patrol, 6 years working motors. My son was born. I decided I didn't want to get bashed up on the motorcycle anymore. Detective test came up, took the detective test, and that was the greatest job in the world. It just was. I mean, from day one, it was just interesting. It was fun. It was challenging. It had everything that you were looking for, at least for me. I did that for 17 years. The last 4 years, I went to sergeant. I worked for 6 different chiefs. There were 2 that liked me. That kind of, you can figure that one out. And anyway, one that liked me was towards the tail end. And he said, hey, why don't you do the sergeant thing? Because it'll give you one more step from where you're at as a senior detective. And then you can, retire with a little more cash in your pocket. And so I did PMs for 4 years. There were 13 of us that got promoted off that sergeant's list. And 12 in that 4 years had at least one, if not 2 special assignments outside of patrol. There was one who did not have a special assignment out of patrol, was rejected for every request. And he's on your show today. So anyway, it kind of my mouth was my worst enemy. But the thing that saved me in the career was I didn't drink alcohol. I'd answer the phone at 2 a.m. and they liked the precision of my work product. And that's really what saved me. So that's it in a nutshell, a bunch of murders and a bunch of laughs, and worked with some of the greatest people in the world.
All right. So thanks for coming, John. That's the end of the show, and appreciate you coming. But you know what? Your sentiment and your recollection of this is we can replay for all of us, of wanting the job and hearing great things about it and wanting to get involved in that. And then, of course, being a detective was all I wanted to be. Danny was a great detective in his time, what he did. And it literally is. It's the best rank. It's the best work out there. And it seems like you had a long, distinguished career, which is awesome. And don't worry about chiefs not liking you. We've all been there for sure. But let's get to something interesting. And we've all been there. That's why I kind of want to phrase it this way. On December 24th, 2002, the phone rings somewhere of a missing woman. And actually, that's all it is. For everyone out there, that's all it is at that point. It's someone's missing, and it goes to your squad. What happens from there, and how does that become what we all know it to be now?
Well, it just, I had a double murder 10 days earlier, so I came off the top of the rotation. And the next guy in line, Craig Grogan, who ended up becoming the case officer, he had small children. So Al Carter, one of the greatest sergeants ever, what he did is he called Al Brocchini, because Brocchini's kids were older. And Brocchini was up at his cabin up in the Sierra foothills. And so he came down and he started working it. And Modesto's it's not a bad place, but I think now it's like the 5th most violent per capita city in California. I think the ranking is Oakland, Richmond, Vallejo, Stockton, Modesto, Compton, and then San Bernardino. I think it goes down from there. So the town isn't that big at 210,000 people, but they have a lot of violence because there's a lot of drugs and there's a lot of gangs. And so when Brock gets out there, because they called him out, it wasn't a typical missing. Here's a low-risk victim. She doesn't lead a ridiculous lifestyle where she's getting liquored up and shooting up and hanging out with the Hells Angels. And I don't have really a problem with the Hells Angels. They got their credo, and I respect it. It's just not the way I ride. But anyway, so there was something from the start that was, bad about this. And, you do this job for a while. At the beginning, you pretty much have a feeling, well, this gal ain't coming home. Well, Brock worked it that night. He did a fantastic interview on Peterson. He got him locked down to a lot of things. And with the video and the audio running, it showed from the start his lack of concern. He didn't have questions. He just was kind of like, well, I'm going through the motions and everything like that because I know I killed her, and I'll get this over with and then I'll resume my life. And so the next morning on Christmas Day, he calls me at 9 and he goes, what are you doing? I said, well, you know what I'm doing. I'm taking the kids over to their mom's house because she's got them on Christmas Day. And I'm thinking, well, this is a call that's probably going to be overtime. So I'm all in on this. And he said, hey, you know, do you want to come out and help me on this missing? And I said, yeah, I'll be there with you on that. And so we went down to the office. He played me the tape. You guys have probably heard it if you watch some of these specials. It's, you know, Scott leaving a voicemail for Laci. He's coming back from the Berkeley Marina. Hey, beautiful. And, I just said, pick up the basket at Vela Farms. I can't make it there. I don't know why the heck he can't make it there. It's on his way home. But anyway, it just, the tone of the message for somebody who's married for 5 years and, she's 8 months pregnant, the tone is just, it's too newlywedish to me. And I just thought this is meant for us to hear it, to take the focus off of him. And, we're suspicious of everybody because otherwise you can't survive in that job. So we went over to the house and, met him. He was walking across the street. I remember we pulled up southbound and he's coming from east to west, and Al introduced me to him, and, pleasant looking guy and, cordial and everything like that. And I went next door and talked to the neighbor that had found the dog, and we just kind of took it from there. But he just did not match up. And, people always, on the other side are saying, well, there's no playbook for grief. Gosh, I mean, I wish I had a dime for every time I heard that. But, there is. And you guys know that playbook because you've seen it. And I don't know too many attorneys that have given death notifications. And I don't know too many attorneys that have spent time with grieving loved ones for weeks, when they're just searching for an update. They want some good news. They know the loved one isn't coming back, but they're hoping above all hope that you are going to be the messenger that's going to alleviate those fears. And, we're not. I mean, that's not what we do. And so when it came to comparing Scott's behavior with Sharon and Amy and Brent, the sister and brother, and Dennis, or, the father, and then Ron, Sharon's, boyfriend, longtime boyfriend, and whether it was Kim or Renee or Stacy or Lori, the closest friends to Laci, everybody had a range of degree of panic, with the exception of Scott. He just didn't. And, they say, well, that doesn't mean anything. Well, it does to us because you do this job. And it doesn't mean that we haven't had other people like that. I had one like that one time when his wife and his daughter were missing, but we cleared him quickly. He polyed immediately. He just was a cold fish. He was just kind of that way. But Scott wouldn't even cooperate with that. And then I had another one where I went with a missing persons investigator to talk to this guy about his missing girlfriend. And I'm just sitting on the couch and I'm watching him, and she's doing all the questioning. And not my case, at least it wasn't at that time, became my case. But, and no concern, not, what are you guys doing? Nothing. And Scott was never that way. What are you doing on this? And so, you walk out of those things. And in that particular case, the guy ended up killing himself as I kept doing interviews behind him and telling people not to tell him that I was interviewing him because I knew they'd tell him. And then, as I was getting close to getting him, set up on a date to do the polygraph, he ended up committing suicide, which solved the case, but we didn't find the body until 8 months later. And actually, we found that body when we were about 3 months into the Peterson case. So, we've dealt with these people before, and it's not an absolute, but it's circumstantial evidence. Bugliosi, who prosecuted Manson, if you read his book, Helter Skelter, he had a really good kind of a visual, imaginary visual thing about a circumstantial case. So many people think it's a chain, and if you break a link because it, doesn't match up, that the chain is no good anymore. And he said, no. He said a circumstantial case is a large cable with strand upon strand upon strand that makes it stronger all the time. And you might lose a strand here and there, but that cable is still strong. And I looked at that when it came to these circumstantial cases, especially the no body cases, to build the case like that. And so, I don't want to rattle on too much. You might have other questions, but we just started working it that way, and we could clear everybody else, but we could never clear Scott because he would never cooperate 100%.
That's fascinating. And, the media did pick up on this. It wasn't like it was unknown that he was doing the things he was doing and not really cooperating. And There's evidence. We say follow the evidence, and you do. However, there's a lot to be said for the instincts of a veteran detective, somebody who understands people, human behavior. What is normal behavior following a situation like this? Your 8-month pregnant wife is missing. If that was me, I would be camped out by your desk wondering why you hadn't made an arrest or found my wife yet. Every minute. I would never leave you because that's how a normal person reacts. And he seemed blasé or bothered by it.
Yeah, he was just bored through the whole thing. And this is one of the things that when you take a look back at the heritage of your former department at NYPD, and whether it's LAPD or any police department that has promoted detectives, career detectives, their solve rate is always higher than agencies that have rotational detectives. And police administrators, some of them are good, some of them maybe not so good, but when you don't allow somebody to specialize in working complex investigations and understand the foreign silent language of physical evidence, when you walk into a crime scene and you can, determine directionality from blood, and you can see the blood on the wall, and it's high impact mist that's coming off the body, and then you can see some cast off on the wall where he dragged the hammer back and the blood flew off of it. If you don't have the experience to be able to understand a crime scene, and you don't have the patience, which of course would drive my partners nuts, to go into an interview and just say, hey, I'm going to be in here for the next 4 hours. And, you talk to the guy, and I can think of one in particular. He killed his wife. Everybody knew he did it. And that we really didn't even need an interview. But I went in and talked to the guy, and 4 hours and 45 minutes later, I come out and I had everything I needed. And it was only about 20 minutes that had to do with the murder. The rest of the time was spent talking about duck hunting and racing our sons and quads and ridiculous guy stuff. But I come out of there, and Brokini's going, God, do you ever get tired of sticking your tongue that far up this guy's butt? And I said, well, I just kind of want to get more of a confession out of him and get this thing locked down. Well, luck would have it, he tried to get an NGI, and the court appointed a couple of shrinks to take a look at him. But when they looked at and listened to the video from our interview, that pretty much defeated his, not guilty by reason of insanity thing. So, career detectives will put the effort into doing what they have to do to make sure that the case comes together. But if you don't have the experience and you weren't trained by somebody like you guys that, has, run these things, your solve rate goes down. And that's the thing I feel bad for victims when they don't, see that. And anyway, I get on my soapbox. I don't want to get on that soapbox too much for you guys. There's other stuff you want to talk about.
No, listen, it all leads to that sixth sense, of having someone in front of you and having all the evidence in front of you, or whatever you're doing at the time. And then just knowing, you just, not to sound like that way, but there's cases that you just know. And it's just a matter of, okay, we know it's him. Let's just kind of work it out. Let's do what we need to do until we get him. We know where he is, not going anywhere. Now, the one question I want to ask you is, this thing becomes this just animal that, from a small little, a missing woman that, again, you knew something was wrong and she probably wasn't coming back, but then it becomes this media circus. Do you guys just kind of let that run and, okay, whatever, we don't really have much to do with that, we're going to do our job? Or is it hard to maneuver through that?
Well, it brought some really good things and some really bad things. I mean, we got, incredible attention and, heaps of criticism about, we're a bunch of goofuses and we didn't know what we were doing. And, of course, you don't care about that. But the one thing it did bring that was really great was it put us in a position where no matter what agency we called for help on this, they would pretty much drop what they were doing. And that's pretty common even when there's not a lot of media attention. Anytime I've contacted other law enforcement agencies out of California and needed help on a murder, they would stop what they were doing, as we would, because that's what we do for each other. But when it came to this case, it opened up, so many doors. Now, it brought some negatives too. I think we had over 11,000 tips that came in. And, so many of them were just, ridiculous. Somebody would phone in a tip. I believe she's in water. Well, hey, thanks for that. I mean, that rules out, 25% of the Earth's surface. We'll start looking down in the South Pacific or something, and then, people would come up with these ridiculous things. And we got the psychics, and they, you answer the phone and they, well, who am I talking to? And I'm thinking, well, you're psychic. You ought to know who you're talking to. So you just you get kind of tired of these guys, they're coming up with this ridiculous stuff. And, but the media people, I was on good terms with the media for the simple reason I'd been in, a detective for, gosh, at that time, I don't know, 13 years, I think. And I needed the media on many cases, especially the print guys, they were down the street, the Modesto Bee, and they had good reporters. I liked them. They were sincere. And whether it was Steve Elliott or Jeff Jardine or Daryl Farnsworth or, there's a couple others that were really good. Garth Stapley, John Cote. I mean, sometimes they cap on us, but they had their job to do. But I knew that when this case was over, I was still going to need their help, whether it was to run a composite, from a sketch artist or something like that. And it was a mutually beneficial relationship. Well, they come up with this gag order, you can't talk to the media. Well, our chief at the time was Roy Wasden, good guy and ethical and solid. And I know what he meant by the gag order. You can't talk to him about specifics of the case, but that doesn't mean if you see him in the produce aisle at the grocery store, you can't say hi and, hey, did you see that game last night or something like that? And I got chewed a few times because I still had this relationship with these guys. And one supervisor in particular, I told him, I says, you're going to be a lieutenant after this. I'm still going to be here working murders. And I need the help of these people. And so, it's just, the one thing about detectives, you come to work every day pretty happy, that you're a detective. And sergeants generally come to work every day wishing they were a lieutenant. Lieutenants come to work every day definitely wishing they were a captain. The captains wish they were, a commander. The commander wishes he was the assistant chief. The assistant chief wishes he was a chief. And of course, the chief wishes he was a chief in a bigger town. So nobody's happy except for detectives, And so we'd come to work, we'd be pretty pleased about it. But, the media they really weren't that big of a pain in the butt to me, because I knew what they were doing and, they did what they did. I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons that we got Garagos is because it was such a media firestorm that, the family contacted him and they wanted him to represent Scott. And one of his first press conferences, he had said that, Scott is stone cold innocent and they're going to prove that he didn't do it. And I'm thinking, well, that's a lofty goal right there. I mean, that's, anyway. So with that, I think Scott would have had maybe a better shot if he would have stayed with the local defense attorney who had been a prosecutor before this case, Kirk McAllister. He knew he knew the layout. He knew what was going on. Not that Garagos wasn't good. Garagos's staff was excellent. He had staff attorneys that, worked for him that I found were extremely credible. They looked for things. They were attentive. So, as far as Scott not having a good defense, I think that's kind of a, crap show because I think he had a very good defense. But as far as the media, I didn't have a problem with him.
So you're at a point in the case, it's going along. You haven't arrested him yet. He's under suspicion. What changes things?
Well, for the first several days, we couldn't find anything wrong with Scott. I mean, he's the guy you want to marry your daughter. And, everybody loved him and everything like that. And things were going along. We were clearing out sex registrants and we were clearing out parolees and, verifying their alibis and everything like that. And that, that doesn't make headlines and everything like that. And people say that, you only focused on him. Well, that's a bunch of bull crap because if we had only focused on Scott, they would have pulled up a list of every sex registrant in Stanislaus County, every parolee that had a commitment offense for a violent attack against women, and they would have paraded those names in front of us, like 4th of July. And the reason they didn't do that is because we did clear those guys. We did get them alibied out. But when it came to Scott, we were kind of going like, well, where next? And then that's when we got that call from Amber. And she had called the night before. She got a hold of somebody on the tip line, and she said, this is my name. I live in Fresno. I'm dating this guy. And I think it might be the same guy whose wife is missing up in your jurisdiction. And she didn't see the coverage because she didn't watch television. She had a friend who was a Fresno cop, and he saw the coverage, and he remembered that she was dating this guy because she was kind of, head over heels for him, and flashing him around like a nickel-plated 38. And so, she ends up, telling friends about him. Well, this guy says, hey, Modesto cops are working this missing. You might want to call him and make sure it ain't the same guy you're dating. So she calls, she tells the tip person, here's the date of birth of the guy I'm dating. I think he lives in Sacramento, but his office might be in Modesto. Can you compare that with the guy you're working? And of course, the tip person goes, I can't give you that information. And so Amber goes, I'm not looking for information. I'm trying to give you information, and Rob can't give you that information. So she hangs up in frustration. She calls back the next day, and she gets a hold of one of the clerks, Beverly Valdivia, whose desk was kind of next to mine. There was an aisle between the cubicles. And so Beverly takes the call, and Brocchini walks behind her desk, and he sees her typing into the monitor, this phone conversation. And so Brock goes, are you on the phone with this chick? And she goes, yeah. So he grabs the phone and he starts talking to her, and she gives him the rundown, and he goes, don't go anywhere. We'll be right there. Grabs me by the earlobe, yanks me, into the sergeant's office. Al Carter, one of the best sergeants ever. I might have said that before because he's one of the best sergeants ever. So anyway, Carter goes, go. Don't tell anybody what you're doing. Just tell me when you guys get back. So we jet down to Fresno. It's 100 miles. Probably went over the speed limit a little bit. But I was in an unmarked car, so I think we were okay. And we go to her house, and her best friend is there who had introduced them. And we do separate recorded statements from them, and we get her locked down. And guys, I tell you, it was almost like she didn't think we believed her. So she's pulling out wine corks and napkins and programs from dance, some, holiday soiree they went to, and all these little artifacts that she'd kept as mementos to kind of like prove to us that she was telling us the truth. Though we didn't have any doubt on that. And then we were going to go over and get a bite to eat. And I had a recorder in the trunk of the car, but we didn't have a device to hook up to her cell phone. So we were going to go to a Radio Shack. You guys remember those? I don't think they're in business anymore. And Brock goes in there to get the device, and we're hooking it up to her phone. And right as he gets the thing hooked up with the recorder, Scott calls. And so that's the first recorded call right there. Now, we had Scott up on a wire intercept, of course, as you guys would have. So we knew what he was doing, but we wanted to record her and him, separate. We didn't tell her what we were doing. Of course, we don't do that. But anyway, did that. And then we were going to go get a bite to eat because, we might not get cleared for what we called in California Code 7, which is lunch break, but we never went without eating, just like you guys did. So we go, hey, we're going to get some food. And then Amber, kind of like an afterthought, she goes, well, hey, would you be interested in some pictures? And I'm thinking, well, of what? And she goes, well, Scott and I. And it's like, no, we're not interested in those. Heck, yeah, we are. So we go over to Walgreens or the CVS, and we give the claim ticket to the gal behind the counter. And, media is going crazy on this story at the time. And, so she gives us these pictures. We're at the photo counter going through these things, and there's a picture of her in the red dress and Scott in the tuxedo and everything. And it's like, yeah, these are pretty bitchin'. And so we separated the, pictures that had to do with the case, and we gave her the negatives and the other pictures back. I probably should have kept the negatives too, because I think that's where the leak came to the Enquirer. I don't know. I don't think it was Amber, but I think it was a leak there. But anyway, we had lunch and we went back, and now we had something that, a detective can sink his, fingernails into. Now we knew there was another side of this guy, and we knew that our suspicions were somewhat warranted. It didn't mean he killed her. And none of us really had the impression, although it's been said before, that he killed her to be with Amber. And I don't believe that was it. I believe Amber was, a recreational vehicle for him until the next one came along. And, he just was what he was. But this case, we worked things. We looked at where to search for her, and the determination was search for her in the San Francisco Bay because it seemed the most likely thing. And it was kind of like it was orchestrated from up above. We would get a lump of stuff on our desk, and as soon as we would clear that out and get everything addressed, we'd get another lump of stuff on our desk, and we'd investigate those leads and get them cleared out. And right around April, guys, there was really nothing left to do on this case but package it up as a no-body, give it to the DA, and see if they'll go on it. And the DA at the time, good guy, former Bakersfield cop, he said, if you don't bring me a body, I'm not going to give you a filing, because it was too high profile. And so we just went, okay. And then we get a gift from above. Storm comes through San Francisco Bay. and the bodies show up, and then that put everything in motion to put the handcuffs on and finish it up. So that's kind of the high points there. You know, I don't want to put you guys in a coma too much, but you know, that's kind of what it is right there.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit Streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
Introducing 221B Tactical, where innovation meets safety. Founded by a veteran police officer, 221B Tactical creates cutting-edge gear designed to keep you protected and comfortable in the toughest conditions. From the revolutionary MaxDri vest that keeps body armor users cool and dry, to high-performance gloves and tactical apparel, every product is field-tested by professionals on the front lines. Eliminate the impossible with 221B Tactical, where gear isn't just built, it's built to protect. Visit 221btactical.com and gear up today.
Looking for powerful defense without the mess? Meet Impact, a revolutionary line of chemical irritants designed for law enforcement, military, and personal protection. With no blowback, no cross-contamination, and easy cleanup, Carry Impact delivers unmatched stopping power without the hassle. Whether you're in the field or on the street, safety should never be compromised. Protect yourself with the next generation of defense. Carry Impact, stopping power, redefined.
Listen, you know, you're not at all. I mean, it's so intriguing because, listen, you can sit down and watch a Netflix series all you want. To hear it from you, you know, and going through it and then kind of Dan and I put ourselves in that spot of what we would do. And it's so similar, you know, of the steps that we all take to get to that ultimate victory of getting him, which did happen with Laci's body and Cotter's body washing up, you know, and the DNA and all that. And you had a very interesting story when you were on Nancy Grace about In-N-Out Burger. And there's times that during the course of investigation, you know you got the guy, but then you know you really got the guy. Tell us the In-N-Out Burger story.
Yeah, the In-N-Out was you know, kind of a classic. If you don't live in California and you've never been there, you In-N-Out, what the hell are you talking about? Well, it's In-N-Out Burger is the name of the place, and it's got some palm trees on the logo and everything like that. It's a fast food place. And, you know, I mean, I don't know if they're the greatest burgers in the world, but everybody in California likes In-N-Out, and because you're in and you're out, you know. So we were driving up. We'd arrested him down at Torrey Pines Golf Course. The DOJ agents closed in on him because he was driving too crazy, and we were afraid we were going to get into a wreck. And so we took him back to the DOJ, and it was California Department of Justice, not the Federal Department of Justice. And so we took him back to the San Diego regional office, towed his car over there. I inventoried the car, you know, found just shy of $15,000 in cash, his brother's driver's license, 3 cell phones, camping gear, neckties. I mean, the guy could have gone from a yacht club, dinner to camping up in the Sierras. I mean, he just had everything in the car. Car was under his mom's name. They had just bought it. His hair had been dyed kind of blondish, and he claimed that it, changed color because he was swimming in an over-chlorinated pool or something, I mean, just ridiculous stuff, you just gotta laugh at this stuff. But anyway, we put him in a waist chain, with the handcuffs at the hips, because he's going to be riding for 6 hours from San Diego. It usually takes longer, but we were in an unmarked police car, so we, went faster than that. And then we had leg irons on him, so he's not going to be able to run on us if he did something funky. But we when you leave L.A. and you go over the Grapevine, kind of the mountains that drop you into the Central Valley, you come down and the freeway splits from I-5 and 99. They both parallel go up, towards Sacramento. And he's sitting behind me, and Grogan gets the verification call from DOJ that they'd confirmed the DNA results from Connor's remains, suspected Connor's remains, and suspected Laci's remains were in fact Laci and Connor. So Craig gets done taking the call. He gives Scott the news, and I'm kind of looking in the mirror, to see what his reaction is, and it's just really nothing, kind of like a sniff or something like that. I mean, it just it total contrast to this grieving. I can't wait for my wife to come home, even though I was going to sell the house, sell the car, and all this other stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that pretty much cinches it for me even more. But then we pull off to get gas in Bakersfield. Craig Grogan goes in to use the head. I'm putting gas and in the unmarked, and I open up the back door because I know we're going to go eat, and we're going to feed the guy. I mean, I don't know. I probably bought dinner for a dozen violent criminals over the years, whether they're bank robbers or murderers or stuff. I mean, you feed them, you eat together, you bond, and it's not like. I mean, you got to like Jerry Orbach, on Law and Order, I mean, the ultimate Lenny Briscoe, the ultimate, New York cop, he's so sarcastic. It's just beautiful. But in the real life, at least in my life, I can't hit a guy in the side of the head with a phone book to get a confession out of him. I got to, suck it out of his butt, with my tongue and everything to get him to give me that confession, because I want that confession. I mean, give me an admission at least. But the confession is the frosting on that cake. And so, I open up the back door to the car, and Scott's in there, and he's just, you guys, the murderer side, you'd kind of like him. He's pretty likable, you've seen him, and I mean, he's very smooth, but most con men are. I mean, who doesn't love a con man? And that's the reason they're successful, because they're like Jell-O on a greased water slide. They are so damn smooth. Well, with him, I open up the back door, and I say, hey, we're going to get a bite to eat up the road here. And, you're not going to Ruth Chris or anything like that for a steak, but we're going to get In-N-Out or something like that. And he asked where we were going. And I said, well, I know there's an In-N-Out a couple, exits up. And if you want In-N-Out, we'll grab that for you. And, because he didn't have his $15,000 out of him anymore. That was the envelopes in the back of the car. And so anyway, he just, as soon as I said In-N-Out, he just kind of looked up and, kind of like a thoughtful pause. And he goes, In-N-Out. I'll have a double with cheese, a small fry, and a vanilla shake. And I went, okay. And, people will say, well, how do you remember this so well? Well, I remember it well for two reasons. Number one, we'd wired my car. So every conversation that we had in the car from the time we left the DOJ office in San Diego until we got to the jail in Stanislaus County was recorded. We didn't want to take a chance of going into court where he, said we threatened him or, we said stuff, anything like that. But over and above that, that's what I have at In-N-Out minus the cheese, because I don't think cheese belongs on a burger, So anyway, I just went, well, okay, you got it. But, we've all had a loss in our life, over the years. And you take a family tragedy or something like that. You just don't. I mean, your food is not really important. A new Harley is not important. Going fishing in the Keys is not important. If you live in Eden Prairie, fishing up at Leech Lake is not important. It's just one of those things where, the loss is going to captivate all your thoughts and you don't feel like eating. And when he can so cavalierly just say, well, I'm going to have this burger and this fry and this vanilla shake after we gave him that news, it just another strand on that Vincent Bugliosi cable.
Pure sociopath. People who are pure sociopaths are capable of remaining calm in situations like that. It's unbelievable. I mean, they can beat polygraphs. They can lie to you straight to your face without any negative physical reactions. The type of things you sit and look for during an interview, you just don't see with them sometimes because they're devoid of that emotion. They don't care about anybody but themselves. There's no concern. She wasn't even on his mind.
Yeah, he just, he'd checked out. It was like the summer before. They were at Laci and Scott were at some party and somebody had a newborn or infant. And so they, people were holding the baby and all the babies, big deal and everything. And, that's why God makes them so cute, because they're a lot of work. But anyway, they offered Scott to hold the baby and he resisted that like, he would a leper. I mean, he just didn't want to hold that baby at all. And then there was another time, I think it was that fall when, or early spring or something, when Laci had come up, it turned out that she was pregnant, and somebody had said something to Scott about, well, pretty happy about the baby coming along thing. And he said, kind of an offhand joke. He says, well, I was kind of hoping for infertility. Well, by themselves, they really don't mean too much, but the resistance to hold the baby, the attitude about infertility and things like that, it to me, it showed that his world was closing down on him, and he wasn't going to be able to have the life that he wanted, the carefree life. And, for him, Modesto was probably backwater. He grew up in San Diego, and, Modesto's in the Central Valley. It's, it's not too exciting. It's on the way to everything good. You're 2 hours from Napa, an hour and a half from San Francisco, 2 hours from Monterey, 3 hours from Tahoe. It's in a great location for all the good things in Northern California, but the town itself doesn't really offer too much unless you're working murders, and it offers some pretty good murders. But he just checked out from the whole thing, and it's really a shame, because if I had known him and I could tell him that the greatest gift in life is having children, I don't know what my life would just be hollow without my 2 kids. It just would be ridiculous. But because we wouldn't be doing this right now if it wasn't for my daughter.
That's right. I was just thinking that.
She had to get this thing fired up because I couldn't figure it out.
I was just thinking that. And you know what? And here's what I want to hit on next. And this is what everyone needs to realize about detective work. You were a part of the biggest case in the country at the time. No doubt, hands down. Everyone talked about it. It was on the news. It was on talk shows. Name it. And then it's done. And then you go back to your desk and you pick up the next case. And that's what detective work is. You were on the news almost every night, walking in and out of the courtroom, at the crime scene, at this. And then all of a sudden, it's just done. And that's detective work. So what was the next day like, Jon? You go to work and it's business as usual now.
Yeah, it was, after we made the arrest, Brocchini and I stayed with Grogan for about a month until May. And then once we got all the things stabilized on the case, then pretty much we left it with Craig because he was going to carry it from there until, through the trial and everything. And then Brock and I resumed the rotation. We went right back on the list. Now, there were 3 other detectives, Dennis Holmes, Tom Blake, and Dodge Hendy, that, took up the slack for us. And those guys got overloaded because, 3 of the 6 of us were working Peterson. And so those guys got, they got hammered. But, I was a cog in the wheel on that thing. I mean, I get a little bit of notoriety on it because I'm one of the only guys that'll speak about it. And it kind of seems like somebody should speak about it for the simple reason that if the law enforcement side doesn't talk, it almost seems like we're hiding something. And people are interested in it. I don't tell anybody what I did. Every once in a while, somebody will find out, and then they'll hit me up and they'll ask me about it. And, and I'll say, well, what do you want to know? I don't have a problem talking about it. But, we get done with our portion of it, and then we resume the rotation, and then you go back in. And, if you're not working a murder, you're working robberies, or violent assaults or things like that, assault with a deadly weapon, things like that. And then, the other guy in the rotation, the other guys that are above you in the rotation, they catch a murder, and our whole team would get activated on every murder. So everybody would get called out, and, the lead would get the case, and he'd partner up with one of us, and you'd stay with him until he got it stabilized. And then you went back to your own stuff, and he stayed with that case. And so it was a pretty good system. It worked pretty good. But yeah, we went back in it. But then other murder cases would get interrupted because there'd be a Peterson emergency, like especially when the trial was going on. I was only over there for 7 weeks, and it wasn't all in a row. But my other cases, suffered a little bit because of it. And it wasn't because I wanted to work, these, Peterson emergencies. But when you got court or you've got things going on, you get, dragged into it. And you try not to get too close to any of the victims' families because that can haunt you. There was a couple that one family in particular that I still get Christmas cards from them, and that was a 94 murder. So, I mean, we're talking, 20 or 30 years ago when that happened, and I'm still close to that family. But you try to keep a professional distance and everything like that. But, you give them your number, hey, call me. call me at 2 a.m. I don't really give a crap because my phone usually rings at 2 a.m. anyway, and it's usually not for anything good. But, you go back into the rotation. And, the Peterson case was interesting to a lot of people because it was kind of sexy. You had Amber on the side. Scott's good looking. Laci's good looking. She's pregnant. It's the holidays and everything like that. But as far as, like the cases you guys handled, some of your really good ones, the Peterson case, when it came to intrigue for us as, career detectives, didn't really get that high on the list. We had a lot of other good whodunits that, twist and turned and you went to different places and you did different things that were really a lot of fun. I mean, the Peterson case was, a tragedy all the way around. The media made it big, but as far as, my favorite murders, it wasn't really up there with that because you had a suspect from the beginning. You always look at the one closest to the victim.
Yeah. So in a case like that, you have the media seems to have a checklist of things that if it clicks a few of these, it'll be hot. And certainly a drug dealer shooting another in the middle of the night is not going to hit it. A homeless person or a prostitute who goes missing and is dumped on the side of a road, not necessarily going to hit it. But here you have a young professional couple, an attractive young woman, good-looking husband. Seems to be an upstanding family. She's 8 months pregnant, goes missing, and then you tie in the whole girlfriend thing. Now it becomes saucy. Now it becomes something that's sexy. It's going to make the cover of the Inquirer. People are going to want to follow this. People want to see cases like this. Find upstanding people that are flawed and broken. And what's the behind-the-scenes stuff? It's the intrigue. The drunk driver that mows down a family. It's one-day news. These are the kind of things that people want to hear about forever. And here we are 24 years after the case. This was a 2000 case, correct?
2002.
2002, 22 years, after the case. He's been in prison for 20 years now, pretty much. And we have some spins in it right now. Currently, the Innocence Project is helping him. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's not the Innocence Project. It's the L.A. Innocence Project, loosely affiliated with them, but not. I don't know if the Innocence Project itself would have taken up this cause because of the overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence on it. Maybe they would have. And the Innocence Project has done good work, and you can't dispute it. We got to pick cops from the human race, and sometimes we get good ones, sometimes we don't. And so sometimes guys will cut corners and things like that. And, this is the advantage that we actually had in the Peterson case because we brought in the FBI, not because they're that great. I mean, I know some really great FBI agents, we always call them famous but incompetent, but, they just a bunch of really good street agents and everything like that. So we brought in other agencies to work different parts of this case so there could never be any accusation or credible accusation that we were hiding things, we were disguising things, we were doing things underhanded. So when you get other agencies that are not connected, it lends, daylight into the investigation and it keeps things on the up and up. So, you have the ability to diffuse criticism that, people who don't do this for a living come up with. And it worked out really good. Their evidence response unit came down from Sacramento early on and processed the house for evidence of stranger intrusion and abduction. And, there was no evidence of that whatsoever, no forced entry or anything like that. And so when people say that, well, you don't have a crime scene and you don't have physical evidence. Well, actually, through my lenses, we do. The crime scene was the bedroom. I believe he kneeled on top of her, smothered her, or suffocated her, because there was a cut on his knuckle. There was a little spot of blood from him that was on the comforter. In addition to that, his hair is in the house. His DNA is on the toothbrush. His dirty clothes are in the hamper. But I think one of the attorneys said something, the absence of evidence is evidence of absence. And there was evidence of absence that she hadn't been abducted from the house. So when you can rule that out, and then this is one of the things that doesn't come up very often, but Laci had a pair of white tennis shoes that she would use if she went on a walk. They're in her closet, and that's where they were. So, she was found in the same clothing that she was wearing the night prior and, not wearing any shoes. If she went on a walk down to the park, she would have had those shoes on, and they were in the closet. So, people can say these things, but they're stretching because they're not familiar with all the intricacies of the investigation. And they're a big case. I mean, I think there were over, I think we had 43 4-inch binders of reports in the case. I don't have the exact list with me, but gosh, I don't know how many thousands of pages of reports that were done there. And like I said, I didn't do all those. I did my share, but there were a lot of cops that worked on this, and there were a lot of people that were coordinating in the search and everything like that with Contra Costa County, San Francisco, Alameda County, the Coast Guard, doing the searches up there. So there's a lot of reporting agencies that, had something to do with this case. And that's why, to me, it's pretty transparent, what it is. But, I know you guys had cases that were just as good as this and better that you worked on. But like you said, the drug dealer killed in the park, it might be a head scratcher for a while, but you're turning over leads and you're interviewing people. And that's what we like doing. And that's the challenge. And then you're doing all these things. You think, I remember leaving so many crime scenes and there was just nothing there. I remember a kid, actually it was that 94 murder where it was a drive-by, young guy, athlete from San Francisco. He was from a prominent family up there. He came down to Modesto to play in a church charity basketball tournament, and he was mistaken identity shooting, caught a bullet in the eye, and a drive-by shooting dropped right there. And, I get there to the crime scene, and it's like, I got nothing here. And, you're saying a prayer on the way home, hey, God, give me something that I can use to make this case. And in addition to that, the ability to recognize it when it comes across the bow. And, that was a common request on so many of the whodunits. And that was the thing that made it so enjoyable, is he always came through for me. He gave me what I needed and our team what we needed to put these things together. So
teamwork. When you have these integral large cases, it's a team effort, and you explain that so well. It's never one person. It's never usually two. There's a number of people that go into these, especially something of this magnitude is just enormous.
And, not to steal Tom's piece of the end of the show, but we just want to make sure we let everybody know that the men and women of law enforcement are working tirelessly around the clock all over this world to keep you safe. They don't do it for money. They don't do it for medals. They don't do it for monuments or notoriety. It's all about public service, and it's a service job. So if you see them, thank them.
Again, for Jon Buehler, thank you so very much. My partner, Dan Murphy, this is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. Everyone stay safe out there. We'll see you all soon.